So I'm Russ Heddleston, co-founder and CEO at a company called DocSend here in San Francisco. I'm from South Dakota originally. Anyone else here, South Dakota? No? No? All right. It's kind of close to Canada. I'm a software engineer by background. I was at Stanford for undergrad and grad in computer science, and I was at a company called Facebook. They were much smaller at the time as a product manager before starting DocSend 4.5 years ago. And what DocSend does is it's a content management for sales teams. And I really hate attachments, so we replace them with links, and then we track things. And what happens is sales and marketing teams both use DocSend. And this puts us in an interesting spot. We work with over 4,000 companies where we just talk to a lot of sales and marketing teams. And so I will joke that we're half SaaS product and we're half therapist, because a lot of the times we get into these organizations and there are sales and marketing alignment problems that software can't fix. And so, we end up just trying to talk both sides down, like, marketing is actually pretty nice. And then we go to the marketing people like, sales is actually working pretty hard. And that's the other half of what we do, and I'm only half joking with that. One of the things though, but that's why we have a lot of data and are able to talk to a lot of these points. The first thing I always tell companies, and I just had a conversation yesterday morning with a marketing team where every company says like, oh, it's really embarrassing, but our sales and marketing are just not entirely aligned here, but we're working on it, and they think every other company's got it figured out, but literally every single company does not have it figured out. And it's primarily because they're just, and this is no news to anyone, they're just fundamentally set up with different incentives and different structures, and sales all about hitting their number, marketing is trying to understand things at a higher level. But it's just good to get it out there that it's not your company, it's almost all companies. So I love this stat from HBR where 87% of sales and marketing departments have negative opinions about each other. So in going through the therapy on this, the first thing is to accept that it's not just your company and it happens elsewhere. And it's a problem. And then the second step is to talk about there are real costs to it. So I was actually joking that this is a game from my native land of South Dakota here that is very similar to the sales and marketing alignment problem. It's a juggling act, but it's actually not. It looks like South Dakota. It's very flat. There's not a lot going on there. If you have misalignment, a lot of companies will sweep it under the rug and they'll say, well, we're going to work on it. It's going to get better. But there are real costs to it. Both orgs have their role. They have a place in the company. And if they don't see eye to eye, something's getting dropped. Something's not getting done. And so it is an area worth investing in, and it is worth solving. And so, it's such an important problem that every CMO thinks about it, and product marketing is great because product marketing is the one that actually works with the sales team and is in the best position to help there be alignment. So I'm going to go through basically three themes that we've seen amongst all the companies we work with, and also give a few stats that we've found on just recommendations for what content works best and why. And then a few examples of companies that we work with and how they've dealt with a problem like this. So the first theme is that marketing content is a really powerful sales asset, and I think this often gets lost in the shuffle sometimes where product marketing gets asked for, oh, I just need this slide deck, or could you just tweak this thing? Or from a sales perspective, it's kind of almost looked at like an agency. But the scalable and really awesome thing about product marketing, or one of the parts of it, is that you can figure out where customers are getting blocked, and this has been addressed in a lot of the other talks today. Figure out where customers are getting blocked and come up with messaging or come up with assets or blog posts that help people unlock and get to the next stage of the sales cycle. And if you can identify all the blocking points that people have and you can create assets to get people over those hurdles and you can distribute those, it's like your best salesperson is every salesperson because you're arming them with the right content to be the most persuasive that they can be. And it's just a concept that's worth keeping in mind and remembering and thinking of it like a portfolio of content. So we did some research earlier this year where, because we sit in between all of this content and prospects and we can see everyone reading it, we looked at 34 million interactions between sales content and prospects and pulled a bunch of stats out of that. And we worked with one of my professors from Harvard Business School and pulled out some insights from it. And so this is one of them. The first question that always comes to mind is, okay, we invested a lot of time building, I don't know, some asset, whatever it is, a case study, a white paper, a sales deck. Did anyone look at it? Does it matter? And this was great to see because, I wasn't sure what to expect. How many people here is this less time than you would expect? Raise your hand. You thought it was read for longer. And how many people think it's more time than they would expect? Yeah, so there are more people who are surprised that it's more time. I think it's very heartening that people, when they do look at something, take the time to read it on average. And I see this happen in companies where, sometimes salespeople aren't the most clear when they're describing something, and they might have gotten the whole pitch wrong or whatever, but then they send the follow-up and they send the thing from marketing that does accurately describe what on earth they were trying to say. There might be more information transfer in this 2.5 minutes of read time than there was in the whole 30-minute sales conversation. So from a product marketing perspective, remembering that these things are read, there is a lot of information transfer, and that's just like a really important concept to remember because salespeople will get it wrong. But if the collateral is correct and up to date, people do spend time reading it. So one company that I think does a really good job of this is a company called Looker. And so they're a BI tool. They're in Santa Cruz. They're a really funny company. They have surfboards instead of conference tables in their rooms. And on the one hand, they're very chill, and on the other hand, they're very analytical and really buttoned up. And Kenneth is on their product marketing team, and he's basically the librarian. And his role is to figure out where is their sales process breaking down. When they lose deals, why are they losing deals? And is there some asset that they can create that might talk about why Looker is better than the competition or why this is worth investing in now? And they really treat their content like a portfolio of arguments. And they train their sales team that, depending on what you see out there, when you get in those conversations, here are the assets that you can deploy, and it's going to make you look really persuasive. And the BI space is super competitive, and they've just been killing it. They're doing a really good job in the space. But it's interesting to see Kenneth's view on this, like how he thinks about it, and how he thinks about it as a whole portfolio that he's managing and trying to get people to use it as much as possible. So this one is great. How many people here have ever had sales that asked them for something? Oh, okay. How many people here have suspected that they didn't in fact need that? Yep, okay, that's good. So when I was working at Facebook before, one of the engineering managers that I worked with, he was early at Google and then was early at Facebook and definitely did not have to work ever again, and he flew in every day. Because you can do that when you have that much money. But he just really liked being at Facebook. He's having a great time. And sometimes in these big debates that we'd have between product marketing and product and engineering, he would just kind of raise his hand and say, I just want to flag that we're now in a data-free zone. And what he meant by that is we've kind of gone from talking about things where there are numbers so we can make an objective choice to just you think this and I think this, and is it really worth continuing to debate? He's basically just kind of hinting that maybe we should go do some research, find some numbers, come back, and then have a more objective conversation rather than continuing just to argue back and forth. And that really stuck with me because it's just a great concept to keep in mind that are we in a zone where we have numbers that can help us make a decision, or are we in a data-free zone where it's just your opinion versus mine, but there's no objective way to figure out who's right in this. So it's great in product marketing if you can bring numbers to the conversation. And the number of product marketers I've talked to where they say like, oh yeah, well we thought this or we thought that, but then the CRO came in and said, no, you're going to do it this way. And it was like, okay, never mind that I just did this survey of the team and this told me we should do this. You want to bring numbers to the conversation as often as possible, and it'll just help it be, not a he said, she said scenario. And the good news is if there's a problem anyone has out there, there's probably a technology solution out there that's designed to help you do that. The number of things out there is great. And we actually see a lot of product marketing teams adopting more technology to help them better do their jobs. So one of the things that, for me, I really wanted this data to answer is like the number of companies we work with where they have one-pagers is always like, I'm always like, well, why? Are you optimizing for printing? You're sending them digitally. And so the idea, for some reason, is that, well, if it's one page, at least they saw it all. And so they'll just cram it all together and it fits on one page and like, I did it, it's one page. And it's like, well, it's tiny font, it's not very legible, and sure, it was all on the page at one point in time, but that doesn't mean they're going to spend more time reading it. So we looked at where you basically, how long should your content be? Because on the other hand, we had talked to companies where they have like a 40-page white paper, and someone went crazy. Like, why on earth would it? That's like a book. Is there a Kindle version? That's too long. But because it's a data-free zone, no one really knows what the answer is. And so in the data set that we looked at from this, there's basically a really nice curve where you can see the longer a document is, the longer it's spent being read. But that falls off over time. But then the completion rate also comes down. And so there's this really nice intersecting zone of like the right number of pages, and that happens to be 2 to 5. People like bite-sized chunks of content. So the 40-page document, there are very few scenarios where I'm like, it makes sense to have that 40-page document. You could probably get away with what are the highlights and sandwich it into 5, or break it into different parts and have it be a series where each one is a smaller bite-sized chunk. And it's also very clear from the data that if you've got a one-pager and you cram it all together and you make it a two-pager, it's going to have a really high completion rate, and the aggregate time spent viewing it is going to be higher. So I always think of this like BuzzFeed. You want it to be tiny, bite-sized pieces of information that people can intake and understand and then leave having learned something, as opposed to cram it all in there and let's just hope for the best. But this is, if you're ever in doubt and you're creating an asset, 2 to 5 pages. So yeah, New York Times has a bunch of like interesting stories there in terms of their sales and marketing teams working together. They had one question where they were just spending a lot of time on these like really intricate proposals, and so they're doing these RFPs, and marketing was asking the question like, is that worth it? Like, should we be spending all this time on it? And sales is like, I gotta have them. I gotta have these things. Yeah, spend more time on it, marketing. And so we're actually able to go look at the data for them, and they were able to figure out, there actually is an optimal length. It doesn't really matter if they spend a lot of time on like the intricate parts of it and basically figure out what matters and doesn't matter. And they're just able to save themselves a lot of time. And it's tough as a product marketer because you suspect that when you spend your time, some things are more impactful than others, and you want to spend more time on the impactful things, but sometimes you get dragged into other things. So try to bring data to the conversation whenever you can to justify spending time on what you know to be the really impactful stuff. And then Forbes, very, very similar story where they were actually able to decide to build more content. The marketing saw that sales was using certain assets and was just able to double down on doing that. And it kind of goes both ways. It's just hard to know like what your sales team is doing, and if you had a crystal ball, you could just see where they spend their time. It's surprising sometimes. There's a product marketer who we were talking with who was saying, he's like, I just know that there's a golden nugget in our content somewhere, and I just don't know what it is. Because I want to make more of that. And so Forbes actually able to see where that bright spot is, and then they're actually able to do more of it. And sales got really excited because they're like, oh man, that thing is winning. I didn't even know that thing was so persuasive. And then they used a lot more, and they have a good feedback loop there. And then they can just not do the other things where it just didn't matter. So the third area, close the loop between product marketing and sales output. For a lot of product marketing teams, the company invests in the role because it makes sense and other companies have it and someone's got to do it. But it's not really clear, and I've heard it said a couple times earlier today that at all hands, the sales team is going to get cheered on. As a product marketer, you just kind of have to accept that. But there are ways to actually close that loop and to prove what product marketing is doing. And I would say on average, companies are really under-investing in product marketing. They just don't give it the credit it deserves. It's partially because it's just hard to measure. And I've never talked to a product marketer where they're like, you know what, our company invests enough in product marketing. I think we're good. It's like, yeah, that's it. No, we don't need more help in product marketing. We're covered. Because you invest in the things that you can measure, and you can measure sales, and so you give all the credit to sales. I also love talking to salespeople where if you ask a salesperson, or talk to them about closing deals, if they close a deal, it's because they're awesome. If they lose a deal, it's because marketing didn't support them. So it's marketing's fault. So you don't get any of the credit, but you get some of the blame. My pitch deck just wasn't on point. The messaging was way off. So another cool thing from the data set, because we saw all these different asset types. So there were like sales decks and overviews and white papers and case studies and one-pagers even, and product descriptions. And the asset that has the highest completion rate is the case study. And I don't know, does anyone raise your hand if that makes sense to you? That's good. Oh, wow, good. We have discovered something obvious, but we've proven it with data now. Yeah, and 83% is amazingly high as a completion rate. And this is useful to know because if you're ever in doubt, just build another case study. But do it in a way that matters, like don't build a redundant one. So I think about Looker, and they really try to have coverage of like having case studies in all the different areas. And I think when I try to think about like why this is true, there are probably a couple things. The first is that people like stories rather than just like facts. Like if you just throw features at someone, they just immediately fall asleep. Like they like a story. Everyone likes a story. If you were to ask someone, do you have a second for a quick story? People are like, oh, I like stories. I'll read you a story. We did this with our sales deck actually, where it used to be a bunch of like screenshots, and then we just like took that away and made it this nice narrative where even if you don't care about what we do, at least it's a cool story that you can read through. And so the completion rate went like up 3x. So we're like, yeah, it works. So the first part is that they are stories. The second thing is that they should be about someone like them looking smart, doing something, which literally everyone wants more of that. It doesn't matter who you're selling to, what persona, CIO. They still want to read about another CIO that looked really smart for doing something. If it happens to involve buying your product, that's nice too. So it kind of feeds into the desire for everyone to do better. And so these two things combine and give it a really high completion rate. So it's also important to keep that in mind where the success of a case study really depends on you having coverage by vertical and by buyer. So it's not just one size fits all for case studies. It's worth just building a lot of them to have coverage, because if you get that, the person gets the case study about them and their industry in another company, it's really, really impactful. Other things, just for comparison, our sales deck I think had like a 16% completion rate. the old one that was just a bunch of features. So you can compare that to like 83. I think our current one has like a 76% completion rate now. So stories just do better, and the data shows that in the drop-off rate. Yeah, App Annie actually has done an interesting thing with their content. And Neil's no longer there, but he was the guy who was the champion that brought on DocSend. But he was able to solve like a really interesting problem with it, where there are multiple different parts of the sales org, and they had various requests, and it was hard to prioritize them. And so by closing the loop, he was able to use as a carrot, like a team would be asking for more content, and he'd say like, you're actually not even using the content that you already have. This other team is using the content they've had, so they're going to get more content. They're going to get more support. They actually used it, like flipped it back on them to like play teams off of each other, which is like very smart. So he was no longer the middleman and the bad guy. He's just the broker in the middle, and there are only so many resources. It's got to go around to the other company. I don't have a slide for it, but another good story that I liked was another one of our customers, Upwork, where once they were able to close the loop between sales and product marketing, they actually just started investing a lot more in product marketing, and our champion there ended up getting promoted. And companies are like, whoa, this is actually super impactful. Like, so yeah, we do live in an age now where you can measure these things, so it's good to keep in mind. And I think with that, I have a few minutes left. So great. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Russ. Appreciate it.